Hour number 2, Chasing Big Joe, 102.5 The Game on this Tuesday. He's Big Joe Dubin. I'm Chase McCabe, Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier behind the glass, and it is time to talk to ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck, also head coach of Innsworth, on the line with us now. Tim, what's up?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
We're doing fantastic. It's franchise tag day. It's almost free agency, and the Titans just continue to do little things here and there. Big Joe, who has been all about Ruben Bain to this point, is now on the Jeremiah Love train after the NFL Combine. What are your thoughts on Love and his fit with Cam Ward?
Well, first off, I'm never surprised when Joe's on a Love train. I think,
hang up on him, please.
It's the most predictable thing I think I've heard all year. Look, he was a great player in college. The testing numbers, are pretty absurd, and I don't know that necessarily. It doesn't feel like it was surprising. I feel like that was definitely an anticipated, performance by him at the Combine. I have not been one of these guys in draft processes that have felt like, spending super high draft picks on running backs was a good idea. And largely because I think that it is a position that you can find elsewhere. And I remember talking to Bill Polian one time at ESPN about just the process. Now his argument was, and he drafted running backs in the first round, Edgerrin James, Donald Brown, I think Joseph Adai maybe was a first-round draft pick. And his thought process was, they're outside of quarterback, there is not another position that can have as much impact and influence immediately on your offense than a running back. And he's not wrong about that. I mean, you can draft a first-round running back, and he can lead your team in touches and carries, and in terms of the percentage of offense that he influences right away, that's a big deal. So, I can't say that I would be completely against it. I just think that if you're going to do something like that, you have to acknowledge, look, this is a position that you can find elsewhere. It's much harder to find Ruben Bain elsewhere. Quite frankly, you don't. So, I think that's where just the value of the position in terms of how hard it is to find guys at that spot would really weigh heavy on me.
So I wonder, too, if with the Titans and the trade, sending T'Vondre Sweat to the Jets, they get Jeremiah Johnson coming back, do they feel they've addressed pass rush? I don't feel like they've fully addressed pass rush because I'm still on Ruben Bain. I don't hate Jeremiah Love, but I really like Ruben Bain. So I feel like those would be complementary pieces. But do you think Johnson being reunited with Robert Saleh could be the answer they're looking for in that department?
Listen. Johnson is a really good player, really good edge player, and I do think that they most likely feel as if some pass rush need has been satisfied. At the same time, there's never been a coach, especially a defensive-minded one, that feels like they're not done adding pass rushers. I mean, the more guys that you can have that you can kind of roll into a game fresh to have production, the better. So I feel like, look, my plan would be, and I think we talked about Bain in the past. I think I had some of his games as a true freshman at Miami, maybe as a freshman and a sophomore, I forget. But he was incredible then. And, I think, maybe I did share this with you. I had a conversation with Jason Taylor about him, who was coaching him at the time. And so, I just think that, in terms of adding up, at the position, seeing what other teams have done in terms of saying, like, look, yeah, we're going to add legitimate pass rushers, but then we're going to have more. It's not unusual to see teams where, every one of their starting defensive linemen were guys that were first-round draft picks at some point, either with them or with another team. I mean, I think that's how hard it is to find just physically talented guys to play those positions. So I'm not saying it takes them out of the Jeremiah Love, business, but I do think that, just kind of loading up on the defensive line is certainly a philosophy people have subscribed to.
Talking to Tim Hasselbeck on the People Show. Tim, this is the People Show. You know that, right?
I mean, I do.
Okay. Thank you for that. 2023, the Houston Texans traded with Arizona Cardinals and gave up the number 3 pick to get Will Anderson. Cardinals got 12th pick, the 33rd pick, 2024 first-round pick, on and on and on. Do we know who the Arizona took with those picks? And the reason I ask this, because it's been done before. Why not sacrifice your guy next year and a few draft choices, move up to 3, get Bain, and get Jeremiah Love? It's been done before. You're not going to miss these guys in the second, third round and all that stuff. I don't even know who Arizona took right there. I do know that Will Anderson's a badass. C.J. Stroud's had up and downs, but not bad. But, I mean, it's there, right? Would you do that?
I think if you feel like you have the quarterback, it's a philosophy that makes sense. You're right about Will Anderson. I mean, the best thing about the Texans this year was that, they could just rush 4 and play coverage, and people couldn't pass the ball on them because they couldn't protect their quarterback. So, okay, I do think that people value – overvalue, certain positions in the trade and the trade market right around the draft, where you can, I think make moves that, look, if you get it right because you're for sure about a player, then it makes sense because third round draft picks aren't always guaranteed to make the team. They typically do, but they're not guaranteed to. You get into rounds, 4 through 7. Not to say you can't find good players. Like Dak Prescott was 4th round pick, but the likelihood that guy is going to really change the trajectory of your franchise is low. So I don't hate the idea. I guarantee if we went back and looked at it in terms of, the Cardinals, there's probably a player where you're like, oh, yeah, no, that guy's pretty good. They're glad they have him. But there are probably some other ones that you would go, what, it really wasn't worth it, from Arizona's perspective.
What about Wan'Dale Robinson? Reports out there the Titans are going to aggressively pursue him in free agency. You like that?
They need receivers, and Robinson's been a good player and played through up and down quarterback play for the Giants. So I don't hate it from a standpoint of a young, talented free agent who, I think we all probably would agree would be, an upgrade to the receiver room. I kind of like the free agent market at wide receiver this year. Not everyone's the same. Some guys are a little bit longer in the tooth than others, but I think it's a pretty decent class of wide receivers that are available, and I think it's coming at a time where it's a strong wide receiver, class in the draft, which I feel like you could, again, beat the market where, you're not paying, extreme top dollar for some of these wide receivers that are, that can play like number 1 wide receivers.
Is it? Plus, he caught a ball from Tommy DeVito. That's pretty good right there, too, right?
When I said up and down quarterback play, I think everyone knew what I was talking about.
The fact that he's 5'8" does not seem to bother me at all. Should it bother anybody else?
I didn't. He's listed at 5'8", huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I don't love that. Just being completely candid, especially for. Especially for a young quarterback, but catch radius does matter. Look, it's why if you look at the guys that I would kind of have more at the top of the market, Pickens, who's obviously getting the tag, big catch radius, Mike Evans, Alec Pierce. I mean, there is something to the big, wide catch radius guys. It's why Kyle Pitts is getting the franchise tag, with the production we've seen from him, the up and down production we've seen from him. It does matter. It is a big man's game, and especially on the offensive side of the ball. So, I don't love that, and that would definitely be something that, I'm factoring in terms of contract, in terms of, also how we're prioritizing the free agents.
He's Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. We'll have more with him coming up next here on Chasing Big Joe, 102.5 The Game.
Well, first off, I'm never surprised when Joe's on a love train. I think,
hang up on him, please.
The most predictable thing I think I've heard.
Continuing with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst and Innsworth head coach. That's pretty good right there, Tim.
I mean, listen, just like behind the glass, ready to go. Just get the phone teed up. I love it.
Tim's on that Innsworth cricket phone. We got to get you a new phone, Tim.
What are you talking about?
You sound like Optimus Prime sometimes on that cricket phone.
Oh, it's better now. It's good
now.
You're
good now.
It's windy out, guys. That must be the Starlink, you have outside your house.
Oh, man.
It is something like that. Continue with Tim Hasselbeck. Now, I had this question ready to go, and now I completely forgot what I was going to ask.
Made you wonder if you renewed your Starlink membership? Is that
it was something like that. Oh, I have it now. What is something that you think right away Brian Daboll is going to be able to teach Cam Ward that maybe he hasn't gotten, he hasn't learned to this point?
It's hard not knowing, what things were instilled in him. But I think the equity that Brian Daboll will walk in there with will be, the other quarterbacks that he's worked with and had success with. And I think being able to use examples, the way it works when you install an offense is, you watch cut-ups of, your team or someone else's team, if you haven't installed it in your offense yet, running the plays that you're running. And so I think what he's going to be able to do is he's going to be able to show him examples of Josh Allen doing things a certain way. And, and probably to an extent, Tom Brady doing things a certain way, and probably to an extent, even Jackson Dart doing things a certain way. And I think that is really powerful. Because, oftentimes as a quarterback, if you're doing something that's new or something you haven't done before, one of the things that is so confirming to, encourage you to trust the process of what a coach is asking you to do is seeing somebody have success doing it that way. It's one of the reasons why I think the West Coast offense has had so much success over time, is that like when you would watch, like, hey, here's Joe Montana doing it. Here's Steve Young doing it. I mean, heck, here's Steve Berline doing it. And then, look, here's Brett Favre doing it. Here's Jeff Garcia doing it. Here's Donovan McNabb doing it. And I think when you can see it actually happen a certain way, coached the way the coach is telling you to do it, I think it's impactful and pretty powerful.
Chase and I commented, Tim, on the last part of the season, the last probably 4 to 6 games, Cam Ward looked like a maverick out there. Like, the coaching staff's not going to be here. I'm going to do this and that. Was that good for him to kind of ad-lib a few things down the stretch? You played the position. You know what would be good because, that staff's not going to return. You kind of like, I ought to see things this way. Is that good or bad?
I think because he had I think – would we agree that he had more success later than he did earlier?
Yes.
I mean, because that's how I see it. Okay, right. And so with that being the case, I think it's a bad thing because, while it was better, I think, for him personally, it really wasn't leading to team success. And it wasn't really leading to efficient quarterback play. And I don't think it was really how you can have sustained success playing the position. So I don't want to say necessarily it's it's awful and it's a setback, because I don't believe that to be the case. But I don't think that that lends itself to improve consistent quarterback play over time. And But I would also say, like, and I don't know Cam Ward, but every interaction that I've seen with him and heard him, kind of explain his process and how he approaches things and things like that, I think he's going to come in open and willing to work. And I think that is a posture that does lean itself, towards success in terms of, learning how to play the position.
Is he the right guy for this team right now? I mean, I know he was the number one pick last year, but Dable coming in there, is he the guy you could build the franchise around?
I think he is. I thought he was that type of prospect, coming out a year ago. I think, the division has gotten harder. Houston's defense is incredible. The Colts stumbled on a quarterback. They're really good. Jacksonville, is definitely an improving team, and I think you're going to make an argument that their leadership is better than it's been in a long time. And so, I think there's a couple things that could be true here. It could be that Cam Ward's the right guy, and the Titans could improve. And I think you could look at the division and say, who knows? Who knows if he's going to be good enough to help them win one? And I think that's what's really difficult about the environment that everyone associated with the Titans kind of finds themselves in right now.
Tim, I noticed on Twitter here a few minutes ago that Jermaine Johnson tweeted at John Franklin Myers saying, next Wednesday coming soon. I think his name has been mentioned, obviously reuniting with Robert Saleh. Could Franklin Myers be a good fit for this defense?
Yeah, listen, I do like when coaches bring guys that they've been with in the past. Because I think that, coaches aren't looking to bring guys that they don't kind of know what they're going to get in them. It felt like Parcells was one of the first guys to kind of like have his Parcells guys that he would, make sure that he brought with him, from a leadership, from a production standpoint, all of those things. And so, look what Vrabel did. Look, Vrabel reunited with plenty of guys that he'd been with in the past when he got to New England. And, I think you make the argument that most of them probably fulfilled a role and a need that the team needed. And so, I'm typically, I typically like those moves in large part because the coach usually only does it if they think they're going to get the best out of them. Like, I'll give you one that I don't think is going to happen. I could be wrong about this. I don't think Tyreek Hill is going to end up back in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people think that it will happen, but I think this would be an example of, I think when the coach knows what he needs to know, then I think they usually make informed decisions.
I think that's a really interesting point. So a week from today, we'll be in the legal tampering period and approaching free agency, the league year beginning at 3:00 Central Time. What do you think the number one story is going to be?
Oof. The number one story? I think there'll be a lot of buzz around some of the quarterbacks, and that doesn't mean necessarily the free agent guys. I think there's going to be a lot of movement. I think we talked about it before, but like what happens with, like, Mac Jones is not a free agent, but like what happens with Mac Jones? I think Mac Jones is going to be seen as a guy that is, maybe more priority than some of these other guys that are about to hit free agency. And so, I think that could have a pretty significant impact on the climate and the movement for the guys that we've talked about before, the Malik Willis and the Kyler Murray and guys that are available like Kirk Cousins and guys like that. So I think that is going to be a big story because I think it also kind of plays into, what's going to happen with quarterbacks, coming up here in the draft.
Tim, we have you've talked about playing with Michael Strahan, Champ Bailey. Yeah. You were with Fitzgerald in Arizona. I was reading this thing about his work ethic. You couldn't tell if he was a first-round pick making millions or a guy that's on the cut line because of how hard he worked. You saw that day-to-day. Was that amazing to watch that? He
was amazing, in regard to that. He I think one of the best things about him is he was always willing to be coached the way that, the last receiver on the roster was getting coached. And so, Todd Haley was the offensive coordinator at the time, and Todd, had coached receivers and was, kind of known to be relatively abrasive and hard, on receivers in general, but on players, period. And it was good. Like, if he was going to yell at Jeremy Urban or Steve Breston, and he was not going to be, worried about, yelling at Larry Fitzgerald. And Larry, responded to it as if he was, an undrafted free agent who's trying to make the team. So I have a ton of respect for Larry. He and I are pretty good friends. We actually were on kind of the camp circuit with our high school age sons a couple years ago. And, he's a really unique guy that is what he accomplished as a player at his size was really remarkable.
They don't make there's not a Larry Fitzgerald around the corner, is there? I mean, those guys are few and far between, I would think.
Well, and I think there was a lot of talk about him not being super fast, but he ran a lot better than people realized, and he was unselfish. He was he wanted the ball, but if he didn't get it a bunch, he wasn't going to complain about it. He did things the right way, and I think that that's carried over to his post-playing career. And quite frankly, it's why he's been as successful as he has been, since playing football.
He is Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst and Innsworth football coach. Tim, great stuff as always, and we'll talk to you on free agency day next week.
Sounds good. See you, fellas. Enjoy the love train.
Yeah, absolutely. That is Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, joining us here on the program. I guess we'll talk to him the day before free agency next week, but
That's right.
I can't keep my days straight. That's
there will already be deals that'll be out there. We'll have plenty to talk about.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Coming up next, we'll shift away from some football for a few minutes. We've had a lot of football. I want to hit on a couple of Preds things and other things. It's Chasing Big Joe, 615-737-1025. And we are presented by the Omni Nashville Hotel on 1025 The Game.